truckloads are. That's me. Steve, can I call you back? I'm at a funeral. Thank you. No problem. Bye-bye. Yeah, there's a normal delay. It takes about 30 seconds. And then you'll see more of this. Okay. Sign off. Love you. Love you. Bye-bye.
I don't know higher, but
Thank you. Your brother too, if he ever shows up. Thank you, boys. I don't know who sits in the front.
Yeah. Immediate family, if you would take seats this way.
let Laura. Somebody let Laura get it.
You gonna sit here? Yeah, I think you can sit there.
No, I got you.
You gonna sit behind us, Lucas?
I want to come over here to the side.
Amichtam of David, protect me, O God, for you are my refuge. I have said to Adonai, you are my guide, my benefactor. There is no divine being beyond you. I delight in the saintly of the world, in them and in those of unshaken faith. Others may multiply idols and seek strange gods. I will not utter their names with my lips. Adonai, you are my allotted portion. You are my cup of life. I have been allotted pleasantness. Lovely indeed is my heritage. I will praise Adonai who has given me counsel. My conscience admonishes me at night. I have set Adonai before me always. God is so close I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart exults, my spirit rejoices, and my body rests secure. For you will not abandon me to Sheol or forsaken your faithful to the pit. You will show me the path to life, to the full joy of your presence, to the bliss of being close to you forever. I'm going to turn back this way, but that's okay. Al Mekomah Tavo V'Shalom. May Ruth go unto God in peace. When we come for a funeral, one of the things that we try to do is to link the life lived by our loved one to the eternality of the divine and the eternality of our tradition. We do so by sharing texts of our tradition as well as teachings. First from Ecclesiastes, from Kohelet. L'chol zman ve'et l'chol chafetz tachat hashamayim. Et laledet ve'et lamud. Et latat ve'et lakur natua. Et larog ve'et lirpo. Et lifrot ve'et livnot. Et lifkot ve'et lishchok. Et sufuk ve'et lukot. Et la'ashlich avanim ve'et kenos avanim. Et lahavok ve'et lirchok mechabek. Et levakesh ve'et le'abed. Et lishmor ve'et lahashlich. Et likroa ve'et litpor. Et lachashot ve'et ledaber. Et le'ahov ve'et lisno. Et milchama ve'et shalom. A season is set for everything. A time for every experience under heaven. A time for planting and a time for reaping. A time for keeping and a time for discarding. A time for loving and a time for hating. A time for embracing and a time for refraining. A time for slaying and a time for healing. A time for laughing and a time for weeping. A time for dancing and a time for wailing. A time for birthing and a time for dying. A time for speaking and a time for silence. A time for seeking and a time for losing. A teaching from our tradition shares that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked his students, Ezu hu derech tova she'yidbach ba ha'adam? What's a good way for a person to live their life? One of his students answered, to have an ayin tova, a good eye. Another said to be a chaver tov, a good friend. And a third, Rabbi Eliezer, replied, to have a lev tov, a good heart. Rabbi Yochanan then said, I prefer Rabbi Eliezer's answer, for those who have a lev tov, a good heart, also possess the other qualities. Ruth had an ayin tova, a good eye, for she was able to look at life and at people and see the good. Ruth was a chaver tov, or chavera tova, a good neighbor and a good friend. She was someone people wanted to be with. She had a pleasant way about her and she supported so many others. But above all, and basic to all else, she had a lev tov, a good heart. She was a sincere, generous human being who put other people's welfare above her own. She could be relied upon to do her share, to give generously of her time and money to her community. It was clear in all that Ruth did that Ruth had a lev tov, a good heart. We'll hear first about Ruth from her children, Elliot and Susan, in whichever order they've decided to come and share.
Ladies first.
Hello everyone, I'm Susan Rodberg Corp. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my mother and her long and courageous life. Ruth, can everybody hear me? Ruth, or Bubby, Yiddish for Grandma, as she came to be known, lived her life loud, but you really couldn't tell. She kept a lot of things secret. She was very private about herself. There were inklings that you could tell. It showed in the clothing she would wear. Her favorite color was hot pink. She wore it when she was young. She wore the mod colors of the 60s, hot pink and orange and yellow. You might see her in a neon green sweatshirt or bright blue and purple and often wild designs. Her home was designed in the 70s and she lived with the bold graphic orange patterns around her most of her life. She wore jewelry that expressed her loud inner life. She shared that love of color with me, and I wear them all. Many people don't know that she had so much going on inside of her. She kept it very private. She wanted to leave a mark. It was important to her to be remembered for what she gave, not what she received. Bubby was devoted above all else. She didn't hug often until later in life, but there was never any doubt that she loved each of us deeply. She always arrived with a bag of goodies in her hands, toys, candy, chocolates, and books. She spent many days mentoring children, young children whose first language was not English. She did it quietly. People often didn't know how she spent her daytimes, but she went to a school in a part of the county where they did not receive a lot of benefits, and she would bring books with her and teach children how to read. And then she would stay and make sure that they had lunch, and she would make sure they had presents for the holidays, for Christmas. She took care of these children like they were her own. Ruth Unterweger was a complicated woman. She was fierce and independent, loyal, and again, courageous. Bubby was not always easy to like, but she was easy to love. Ruthie, as she was known in grade school, then Ruth, then Mom, then Bubby. She was never wrong. Bubby would correct every single thing, always. She couldn't help herself. All those little jabs, they could hurt if that's what you wanted to hear. Sorry, I'm shaking. But if you listened loud enough, you could hear her very clearly stating how much she loves you. Let me breathe for a moment. In her final days in the hospital, she felt trapped inside her body that wouldn't respond. She was shouting to us what she wanted us to know. It was coming out as a jumble of sounds, a few clear words repeated over and over. We were in her room around the clock. Zadie, or Mike as you know him, stayed with her all day, and Lee was there with him, a constant, stable reminder of how much we loved her. Paul came and stayed the nights, those long nights with her, alone. The rest of us came when we could. Elliot had other family members to tend to. He was around the country and still made time to get to her hospital room. I was with her late one evening, and I called home to check on my children. 2 were asleep, but Valerie answered. I FaceTimed with her, and she could hear Bubby behind me. She asked how Bubby was and if she was in pain. We talked, and I asked her if she would say hello to Bubby. Bubby was mumbling in the background, a constant symphony of these sounds she really wanted us to hear. I turned the phone so Valerie could see her clearly and asked her if she would speak to Bubby. Valerie said, "Hi, Bubby, this is Valerie." And Bubby paused. There was a clear, calm moment of silence. And Bubby said, "Hi." And then another pause. It was exactly the tone that Bubby would answer the phone when my children called to speak to her before any of this happened. And then Bubby resumed, trying to tell us what she wanted us to know. And Valerie looked at her, knowing, understanding what had just happened. that she heard her and that she responded and showed her how much she loves her. In her honor, I will always think of Bubby when I wear all those loud colors as I am today, and I will remember how deeply she loved us all. Bless you, Bubby. May you now find peace and rest for all eternity. I love you, Mom.
I don't have as prepared a little talk as Susan did, but that was very nice, and it was all true. Yep. So I have different kinds of things that I was going to talk about. A little bit of stream of consciousness, just some notes that I made, things that I thought I would say. One, as many of you may know from our family and from the bowling league and Hadassah and other places, wherever she was, if she was in her sphere of influence, then you had to do things her way, and if you didn't do it her way, get out of the way so she can do it herself. Which was how we mostly operated. Let her do it because she liked how everything was done and wanted it done her way. One thing that I remember is when I was in college, I had several New Year's Eve parties at our house that she allowed me to have, and we inundated the house with, I don't know, as many people as are probably here, and it lasted all night, and it was very loud. In the morning there were people sleeping on the floor and on the couch and all over the place, and there was probably beer and alcohol spilled all over the floor, but she was willing to let me do that and have the party in her house, and as long as I cleaned it up the next day, and my friend Randy, who's here, helped clean that up. She was happy to have everybody over. Many of us have smartphones these days, iPhones as Androids, and my mother hung on to her flip phone as long as she could. She wasn't going to any smartphone, and her little phone she kept with her, and she could make calls. She couldn't do texting very much, but she would always answer, and that was the best she could do. She was, as Susan mentioned somewhat, she was very welcoming and invited many people to our house for holiday dinners and holiday events and non-holiday events. I had lots of friends of mine who ended up coming to our house for many different dinners that my mother was always welcoming and happy to have, and invited over and made them feel part of the gang when we were there. And at all of these events, at our house, at my house if I had a party, probably at any event where there was a party, there was never a bowl in the right place. If she went in and there were bowls out, things on display for food, it had to be moved at least just a little bit to her liking. It was, we eventually just let her do it. It was a little bit amazing to me that she and Mike are still bowling in their mid and late 80s, and that she was still doing that up until the very end. Going to bowling, although she liked the bowling people, she liked doing it, it was something she had to do. Sometimes I would call on a Tuesday night and she wouldn't answer her phone, and then I'd remember, oh, it's Tuesday, they're at bowling. I'll have to wait till another time to call. My wife Annette reminded me that Mom always kept track of everybody in the family's birthdays and anniversaries, and would send cards for everything to everybody. And we had an extended family that kept growing. I was married initially, my wife passed away, I have a daughter and grandchildren, and then I have a new wife and she has kids, and my wife and Ruth remembered everybody and kept that calendar. That was very nice, and she acknowledged everybody. On paper, yes, not on a computer. Although, when as they mentioned, I've been doing a lot of traveling over the last year for work, flying back and forth to California about twice a month, among other places. And she likes to keep track of my flights, so I would forward her my itinerary, and she didn't use a smartphone, so she would go to her computer, I presume, and track my flight sitting at the computer, and know when I had a layover and when I was landing, and sometimes I would travel and she would say, "You didn't send me your itinerary." I want to keep track. And one of the things that I thought about is she only had a high school degree and she never went to college, but she was very smart and very intelligent and lived and acted as if she was a college graduate. She was very intelligent, and even though she didn't have that degree, yes.
She went her first year of college. She was Dean's List.
She did go first year of college?
She went to Towson.
Dean's List.
And she was Dean's List. Well, very good. All right. I am corrected. But, so I don't know. I'd like to thank all of you for being here, and I think that's all I have. Unless anybody else has any other thoughts? Thank you very much.
Thank you both for sharing. The words that come from close family members are always from the heart and reach straight to ours. Ruth grew up in Baltimore with her brothers Myron and Jerome. They and their parents, Ellis and Pearl Bloom. She saw there what it meant to be dedicated to the family, with her grandparents living with them, and her mom, the youngest of 12, taking care of her grandfather. She supported her children, Lee, Elliot, Paul, and Susan, in their many endeavors. She was a school volunteer and a room mother. She made sure they were always at synagogue for the holidays and shuttled them to religious school. She even worked in the religious school. They were regulars at the retreats, and all the kids had their bar and bat mitzvah at TI. She and Leonard had joined Tiferet Israel when they came and found it to be supportive of social action and social justice. They would host the social action committee meetings in their home, with Leonard planning the speakers and Ruth serving as the host. Ruth gave of her time to Susan's ballet group and always made sure that the show would go on. She was in charge of the front of the house, coordinating the ticket sales and the costumes. She was meticulous in all that she did. She was very detail-oriented and would want everything done just right. Whether it was in her volunteer work or in her professional work, she always gave 100% or more of her effort. She worked as a bookkeeper for a number of businesses, including Stearns Shoe Repair, an interior decorator, and an investment guru. She was very invested in the people she worked for. A theme that you'll hear a couple of times is that once she was working for you, she never stopped, even up till the end. She was still doing the books for the investors up until just a few weeks ago. Similarly, she was doing the record keeping for the bowling league. She and Mike were in until just a few weeks ago. She had said that she wouldn't pass until she had closed the books on this season and recorded the award money. She was true to her word and worked right up to the end. All the work she did kept her from taking any vacation time. She was fine with this because time away meant she wasn't able to support others. If someone else planned a trip, though, she was happy to go. From a trip to St. Augustine on a plane that Leonard bought, to going around the world with Mike on his business trips. She enjoyed seeing new places. Planning these trips is just not something she would have done for herself. If she did plan a trip, it was to make sure that Mike went to see his parents in Florida, or to be with her grandchildren, Jennifer, David, Stephen, Joseph, Daniel, and Lucas, Valerie, and Veronica. They were all very special to her. She tried to meet them on their level and embraced the role of Bubby. She would want as many of them as possible to be around for the family celebrations of holidays. They would gather for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur breakfast, and Passover Seders. These were another set of things that she was not interested in giving up. She would never let anyone else host if she still could. Ruth was very involved in her Hadassah group. This was a central part of her life. She served as president, you guessed it, right up until the very end. She would always write the newsletter, and she spearheaded a breast cancer awareness campaign to educate students in every high school in Montgomery County. She was never the one up in front speaking, but you could bet she was pulling the strings. She did the organizing and made sure everything went off without a hitch. When she and Mike married, his family with sons Paul and Michael blended together with hers. She also would make sure to send honey cake to her brothers across the country. Recipes she learned from her mom were still the ones she used to make her sponge cake, as well as the chicken and brisket for the holidays. Speaking of holidays, this week we'll celebrate the holiday of Shavuot. We've heard how the holidays were important to Ruth, and we've heard how she was devoted to her family and to her community. We've shared how she was a role model for all of us, but particularly for her children. On Shavuot, as with many of the major holidays, we'll recite Yizkor, the memorial prayer. When we recite the Yizkor prayer for a mother, we don't just speak of our mother, but we refer to her as Imi Morati, my mother, my teacher. In this simple phrase, we have a recognition of the significant role entrusted to the mother, her role as teacher of her children. For the most significant part of a child's education occurs not in the classroom, but in the home. The mother conveys to her children her fears and her hopes, her defeats and aspirations, through the way that she handles and experiences life. These hopes and values are what shape the outlook of her children and her grandchildren and generations beyond. This morning, as we bid our farewell to Ruth Unterweger, we recall the phrase Imi Morati, my mother, my teacher. For above all, Ruth was the person in her family to whom others looked to for guidance. Whether you were her child, whether you were her grandchild, whether you were a cousin, a niece or nephew, or a friend, or even just somebody that you brought home on the spur of a moment for a holiday meal, you could always connect with Ruth, and she had guidance. We could look to her to see how to deal with all that life brought. Zichrona livracha, may her memory be a blessing. Those who can now rise for a memorial prayer.
Rabbi, I just wanted to say 2 minutes worth of Hello everyone, I'm Eileen Schneider, and I am the region president of Hadassah in Greater Washington. And I'm sorry. I just can't believe that we lost Ruth. She was a co-president of the Ruach chapter in Leisure World. She was incredible. Anything I asked her to do, it was done. It was done quickly. It was done with no fuss. She just came through every time for everything that was necessary. And along with her co-chair, Sandy Stein, they ran a very wonderful chapter with meetings every month, speaking the party line of Hadassah. So I just want you to know that we have set up a fund in her memory. If you would like to contribute to this fund for Hadassah, for what Hadassah's mission stands for, many things, but especially the hospital in Israel, where they do tremendous research on all kinds of medical issues. Please send your contribution to the Hadassah office on Park Lawn Drive in Rockville. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Now, those who are able to can rise for memorial prayer. Aloha slichot chanun v'rachum merach apayim v'rav chesed hamitzei chapara pesha v'hakrava yesha mnucha nachona tachat kanfei shchina v'malot kedoshim v'turim kazor rekiem esirim et nishmat Rivka Elka bet Eliyahu Pearl shehachal olama ana balarachamim zochrala letova kol zechuyoteha v'tikoteha v'artzot hachayim uvtach la Sharei tzedek ve'ora, sharei chemla v'chanina, v'seter knafecha hasti rehel olamim, V'tzrua b'tzrua chaim et nishmata, Adonai hu nachlata v'tanuach b'shalom, al mishkava v'nomar, Amen. Aloha slichot, God of forgiveness, you who are gracious and compassionate, patient and abundantly kind, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Rivka Elka bat Eliyahu Upearl, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that you remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that Ruth performed. May Ruth find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace, and we say, Amen. In a moment, we'll begin the process of the burial. We do that first. I don't know if do we have earth from Israel? No. Do you have any
It's in with already.
It's already, the earth from Israel is already in the casket. So we begin the burial. Anybody who is interested, is here today, can help with the burial. It's seen as the highest form of kindness that one can share to another. It's highly appropriate that we're all here to escort Ruth to her final resting place. She would never have allowed for a funeral to pass without attending. Whether it was someone she knew well or barely knew at all, Ruth was there. She also spent many nights quietly supporting other families by sitting with the deceased as a shomer, never leaving them alone. While the act of shmirah and burial is done with no expectation of anything in return, we can all participate today as a way of paying Ruth back for the many kindnesses she showed to others during their difficult times, and again connecting to all that she's shared with each one of us. So two different customs around the burial. One is to use the back side of the shovel to show that this is something different and out of the ordinary, not a regular usage of it. And the second is to return the shovel to the pile of earth so that each person can complete the full action from beginning to end. So first I'll welcome up family members, and then others who want to can participate. There's 2 shovels for the big pile, and we've got a bucket for other earth as well.
challenging at times.
Same personality, or that makes sense.
Planning all this, I'm missing her. So, I had, even the past few years, I had a number of the holidays, less of my house. She still wasn't involved totally. I had to get approval from her for everything that was being done. Her heart was in the right place. She's specific about what she wants done. Thank you, Arm. I'm the godfather of Ruth's son. One of many. No. My brother over there, Paul. That's my father over there. Paul. And Ruthie was my father. That's actually a friend. My brothers are over there. She has 4 and two stepchildren. And my father has more, which she's accepted in. Anybody's. This is it. Paul? Paul about that. He was very involved. This is a number of the doctors. I've been asking about you when you're limiting happy yourself. Go until the end. Go sooner than she expected.
Randy has.
She and the girls.
I did. That's why I realized here. And then. It takes longer than we were married. Oh, yeah, I have oh, it was? Yeah, that's what Randy does. Yeah,
She has
I'm not
something.
sure if I can.
Fine.
Yeah,
Today and tomorrow. We were informed we had to stop. We were going to do Thursday too.
I'll be around too.
Hopefully we'll be back by then. Because Paul's planning on making sure we build.
That's it.
Well, like we did for my grandmother.
No, it was over shine.
That's good. Have to do that for her too.
Yes.
Zoom or whatever, and then they come in on Sunday. I think they had to give up the nursery.
So, what is going to change?
Well, nothing to do. I mean, we're, like I said, we kind of, did our own thing, so we're going to, everybody on the board's good. They do their job. I don't have to unfortunately, they're getting older, but we're hanging in there as well.
Okay, so you can invite me again. Let me know. I can give you the rules, whatever you want. Gorgeous eyes. Oh, then she doesn't. She stood out. She wasn't getting up after I spoke before you said
V'yashov ha'afar ha'aretz kishahaya. The dust returned to the earth as it was. V'haruach tashuv el ha'elohim asher natana. The spirit returns to God who gave it. Eternal God, creator of your life, you give the gift of your spirit and we are formed. You take it in return and we turn to dust. We are grateful for the many blessings in Ruth's life. We now turn to you, seeking comfort and light. Harachaman, compassionate one, grant us solace and strength. Reinforce our faith, for you are our rock and redeemer. And let us say, Amen. We're now going to share the 23rd Psalm as we prepare for the mourner's Kaddish. Rabbi Seidel, Earth Israel, will share the Psalm.
Adonai roi lo echsar, bihinaot deshe yarbitzeni, amei menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi yishovev, nafshi yishovev, yancheni b'maglei tzedek, yancheni b'maglei tzedek, yancheni b'maglei tzedek, l'man shemo. Gam ki elech b'geitz al-mavet, lo yirara ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha, shivtecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת בשמן ראשי, דשנת בשמן ראשי, דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We look to God when we need comfort. When we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, we look for support to help us cope with the pain we feel when we've lost someone we love. We now share the words of the Kaddish, an expression of our desire to reconnect with the divine. At a time where it might be hard for us to share words of holiness, words of gratitude, we reach out to God with the words of the Kaddish. Those who can now can arise, especially the mourners, to join together. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divrach hirutei v'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'hagala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach leolam omei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal, shemei d'kusha brichu. La'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tush brachata v'nechamata, dami ran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, l'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, ruya aseh shalom. Amen. At this point, the focus shifts from escorting and showing respect to the dead to comforting the living. There'll be a number of opportunities to do this. One is as we exit here today, people can extend the traditional words of consolation. May God grant you comfort among all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Last night, as I was speaking to the family, I shared that we would form two rows and the mourners would walk through them as we leave. But we're in a period of time of the calendar where we don't do that, right? Where we're sort of blending together the joy of a community with a holiday coming up with the sadness of a particular family and a community, and trying to blend those together. One of the things that the rabbis decided is that we don't do the two rows, but we will still escort you from the graveside. If everybody could move in some way away, we want to be able to have the cemetery, not quite yet, with cemetery workers to come to close the vault so that those who want to can continue with the burial, but the cemetery workers will need room to be able to bring in their equipment to do that. So if people could move down towards the cars and towards the grass, that would allow for them to do that. and also the opportunity to be with the mourners at Shiva. First, following the service today, people are welcomed to Lee's home at 6722 Summer Rambo Court in Columbia, Maryland. There are some sheets of paper somewhere here that people can get if you want directions. And also there'll be Shiva services tonight and tomorrow at that same address, so you can take directions there. So again, we extend the traditional words of consolation. Hamakom yinachem etchem b'toch sha'ar avalei Tzion v'Yerushalayim.
Well, I just want to announce. Hi, I'm Lee, Ruth's oldest. We are serving lunch for everybody who wants to come back after the funeral at my home. So they just gave the address. Somebody has pieces of paper around that has at the address if you need it. Otherwise, you can follow some cars. We're going to be sticking around because we're going to make sure she's completely buried.
Thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the actual burial and service. However, if you would like to stay, you are more than welcome to do it. The gentlemen from the cemetery are going to come and put the lid on the concrete liner over it, and then they're going to put the rest of the earth on that. However, those who wish to stay can, but the service is now concluded. So thank you for coming.
All right, anybody who would like to stay to cover